Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Sylvia and Peter. We're talking about things that has something to do with mental health in general, and very often in business in particular. And today we have come up with a topic that we like to talk about, which is mostly why people don't speak up. There's a lot of research about this, that, and the other, and we think we know why people have mental health struggles, issues, emotional problems. But we also know that people don't really talk about it an awful lot or speak up. So this is a bit of a difficult one because why don't people speak up?
Mm, mm. Um, I can only, I mean, you and I both work with many people who do find the courage and are brave enough to speak up. So I'm talking from my, excuse me, talking from my own experiences here. Um, we were joking, weren't we, before we started this, that many years ago, we're old enough to remember BT used to have run a advertising campaign, Bob Hoskins, it's good to talk, but yeah, it is good to talk, but why don't we talk? Why don't we speak up? There's been lots of research and a lot of people talk about this, talk about in the workplace, getting people to speak up. But for me, and everyone cites the usual suspects, but I suppose about shame and stigma, perceived weakness, fear on so many levels, which perhaps we'll touch on if we get the time, Peter. Impact on job and career, embarrassment, might be cultural differences. But for me, there was a lot more. None of that entered my head at all. We've touched on fear of failure. We've spoken about that a lot. Because for me, my fundamental underlying issue was I felt I was a failure. So then speaking up and sharing that I wasn't doing so well, again, this not coping to me was weakness, and further to me proved my failure. And so I got stuck in a failure loop.
Hmm.
Fear of being judged. Would others distort, delete, generalize what I had to say to fit their perception so they could make sense of what was going on, or put their spin on what I had to say, or ridicule what I had to say, put their meaning on my words rather than accept mine at face value. With that line from a song, isn't it? Where they only hear what they want to hear and disregard the rest. That really taps into mind reading. So would they sort of try and second guess what I was saying? Oh, by that you mean this, Sylvie, and by that you mean that, Sylvie. Why can't you accept what I have to say on face value? And also, how would they respond? How would they respond to what I had to say? And that, in a way, kept me stuck because that fear, my own fears of what other people, how they would respond. And I think one of the other big ones for me was there anyone strong enough to hear and listen to what I had to say? Because I tried a couple of times to speak to people, and you could almost sense them going, "Ooh, you don't." Not that they physically did that. We talk a lot about listening, don't we, Peter? We get a sense of when someone is listening to us. But that sense of, how are you, Sylvia? Well, actually, so you think, okay, I won't bother. So you get stuck in being silent. There's just a few of my experiences.
But what you're saying there indicates to me that you knew something was going on that wasn't
Yes,
right.
I did.
But
Yes.
whereas I didn't speak up, I really didn't because I didn't know anything was wrong.
Mm, mm,
My life was, as I've described in my book and other places, a chore. It was dreary. There was no fun in it. But for me, that was my normal. I didn't
mm,
know any different.
mm,
So how could I speak up about anything?
mm,
I thought other people were being rude to me or didn't like me and that kind of thing. But I saw that as them being nasty people, if you like. I didn't realize that I had a different and unhelpful view of how the world worked. So I
Mm-hmm.
didn't know any better. So why would I speak up about anything that I didn't know was happening?
Mm-hmm.
And yet I'm now working with a client, for example, who is neurodiverse, and she is looking for ways in which to not have to speak up, because she has to explain all the time why she can't remember or why she's a little bit clumsy. She wants to be, the word we've been told not to use, she wants to be normal. So she's tired of speaking up. She just wants to be like all the neurotypical people.
Yeah.
Because she's faced with so many people who do not understand that she's a perfectly intelligent young lady, but the brain is wired slightly differently. So she has a couple of issues that other people don't have. That doesn't mean she can't function. She's absolutely, it's brilliant in every respect that I've come across. But yeah, she's fed up speaking up and explaining herself. And she just wants her condition to go away, which it never will, because that was the way she was born. So are we afraid of being found out? Are we afraid of consequences? I mean, I only stopped knowingly speaking out when I'd been to see my GP, and he quickly diagnosed, I suppose, depression. And those were in the days where they didn't type at a computer. When you went to see them, they wrote something on a notepad, and I read upside down psychiatric consultation. I thought, oh my God, this is dangerous, because if anyone knows this, I'll never get a job, or I'll be sacked from the one I have, or something like that.
They're scary words, aren't they? Psychiatry.
Then a different perspective comes in for me, not wanting to talk. And now we are in this situation where everybody, so it seems, has a story to tell, and they tell it. But it's kind of after the event. It's not before the event.
It's interesting there you say about you didn't know anything was wrong, for want of a better phrase. Similar to mine is that it was my excuse me, it was my life cycle, my experience, and I didn't know anything different. I didn't know that I was experiencing was depression, or that I was depressed. It wasn't until I went to my GP, for another reason, that I didn't know what I was experiencing was depression. She asked me loads and loads of questions. I was just feeling miserable, isolated, alone. Didn't want to be here in all sorts of different ways. And when they ask you loads and loads of questions and you come up with a diagnosis, it's like, really? No. Because I'd lost the inability often to express or articulate myself, because how do you express I'm feeling miserable, isolated and alone? How can you convey the depth of how miserable, isolated and alone I am? There isn't another word.
And I think that's an extremely important point to remember, that how do we explain something we don't know exists? How do we get that message across to somebody? I know I told exactly the same story to my GP, who didn't say what he thought was wrong. He just offered me antidepressants, which I refused. I came with the same story to the psychologist at the local hospital he eventually referred me to, and I was still none the wiser. And I told the same story to the second psychologist, who did a little test and said to me, Peter, you describe yourself as rather depressed. That was the first time that I knew what was wrong. But I've been through a number of learned individuals who didn't seem to, if they knew, they certainly didn't tell me what they thought was wrong, except the last one. And then from there on, it was just fine, because now I knew that it was something that could be fixed, and not me who was somehow a person gone wrong. And I think it's very important to understand that when people do not speak up, it might actually be because they don't know how to say what it is that's going on inside them.
Mm. And what was interesting for me is that I couldn't find the words to express how I was truly feeling, but I found it in a lot of song lyrics. Sometimes, yeah, that's how I'm feeling. That's how I'm feeling. You know, to convey the depth of what's going on, and you know, not having that ability to express or articulate, but not knowing what you're expressing or articulating about. You know, similar to you, I went to my GP and got the diagnosis, and then it was okay. So what can we do about that? But it was quite hard hitting to be able to be told you're suffering or you've got diagnosis of X, Y, and Z when you had really no idea, because that was how my life was. And you know, and that again, that mistrust in terms of those underlying issues. You know, I believed no one was strong enough or could handle what I had to say. You know, and I think that also what stopped me speaking up as well. But then when you get someone, you know, and I was proved wrong, hands up, I was wrong, because my GP understood, she listened, she heard, and when I was referred to a therapist, understood, believed, listened to, and heard, and it makes such a difference. And then they can enable me to start articulating what I had to say. Funny enough, I say through song lyrics, because I didn't have the ability to express it. But it's interesting as to what I learned is quite often the reason why I didn't speak up was my own misgivings about other people, like this mind reading thing. Would they believe or whatever it is? But when you do finally speak, find someone that does listen. They are out there.
Yeah.
You know, there are people out there who will believe, who will hear, who will listen. I was, sounds like I was luckier than you, Peter, because when I went to my GP immediately, she believed and all those things. I didn't have to go through a few, and I wonder if I had, would I have given up? I don't know. All I know is I had a fantastic GP. So, and the rest, as they say, is history. But it's an interesting as to why people don't speak up. And for me, when people, you know, have their own presuppositions or assumptions or presumptions why someone doesn't speak, find out from the people why they don't speak up, not putting our stuff on them.
And I think that's probably a very good place to end this conversation, that it's not always easy to say what's going on, but try anyway, because there are people out there who are trained to listen, who are trained to listen between the lines and ask the right questions so that you get to sort out whatever needs sorting out.
They are there. They are out there.
They're out there, and they're ready and willing. So on that note, thank you so much for following this conversation to the end, and we shall see you in another video. Take care. Bye for now.
Thank you. Bye-bye.